Nights Digest. Welcome.
Wednesday's Night Out.
Nights Digest. Joseph. The book concerning the power of habit by Charles Duhigg. Instructor Joseph. March 13th, 2025. Began notation. Why we do what we do in life and business. The prologue, The Habit Cure, spoke of a lady by the name of Lisa Allen, a smoker among other habits that determined the outcome of her marriage. After divorce, she felt had to do something, so she took a trip to Cairo on credit cards that weren't maxed out yet. She needed a goal, something to work toward. She gave herself 1 year to prepare. In particular, she would need to quit smoking. She was the scientist's favorite participant. Giving up smoking to accomplish her goal had touched off a series of changes that would ultimately radiate out to every part of her life. When researchers began examining images in Lisa's brain, they saw something remarkable. One set of neurological patterns, her old habits, had been overridden by new patterns. Impulses were crowded out by new urges, and Lisa's habits changed. So had her brain. Habit forming makes things possible. Chapter 1, The Habit Loop. How habits work involved the research of Eugene Pauli's brain, whom had been rushed to the hospital due to dehydration diagnosis, viral encephalitis. Eugene suffered memory loss. When he got home, he couldn't remember his friends. Larry Squire, scientist, University of California, San Diego, the basal ganglia was central to recalling patterns and acting on them. Habits, scientists say, emerge because the brain is constantly looking for ways to save effort. Squire's experiments with Eugene revolutionized the scientific community's understanding of how the brain works by proving once and for all that it's possible to learn and make unconscious choices without remembering anything about the lesson or decision making. After having a conversation with his daughter that he ran away with, he suffered a massive heart attack in the conversation he ran away with. Chapter 2, The Craving Brain, How to Create New Habits. Claude C. Hopkins was presented a business idea of toothpaste, Pepsodent. Claude Hopkins aided in the sale of many products like Schlitz beer, booming most products to the top with beautiful slogans. With Pepsodent, what stood out most to consumers was the taste. If they went a day without brushing, the Pepsodent taste would remind them that they did not Teeth film was what most to all competing toothpaste could not remove until Pepsodent. Habit loops, which was mentioned in the past chapter yet not in Knight's Digest. In this chapter, it speaks of monkeys loving juice. Julio's habit loop in an oval-shaped diagram, Q to the left, equals shapes on the computer. Routine, middle top oval, lever which Julio pulls. Reward, right of oval, equals drop of juice released into mouth. Satisfaction. At first, when Julio received his reward, brain activity would spike. Later, brain spikes came between shapes on screen and lever. This chapter also spoke on Febreze, which was a little more challenging for Hopkins. Claude C. Hopkins showed how new habits can be cultivated and grown. Thursday, March 13, 2025, 7:47 p.m., 1947. Chapter 3, The Golden Rule of Habit Change. Why transformation occurs starts of about 1996. Tony Dungy and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, whom said, "The key to winning is changing players' habits." Dungy only wanted to attack the middle step, the routine. The golden rule of habit change states, you can't extinguish a bad habit, you can only change it. If you identify the cue and rewards, you can change the routine. At the conclusion of 2001, Dungy was fired. The next year, Tampa Bay Bucks won the Super Bowl, using Dungy's formations and players and relying on the habits he had shaped. In 2007, Tony Dungy and the Colts had won the Super Bowl against the Patriots. In Part 2, Chapter 4, Keystone Habits of the Ballad of Paul O'Neill, which habits matter most, is about Aluminum Company of America and new CEO Paul O'Neill. I intend to go for zero injuries. By the time O'Neill retired in 2000, the company's annual net income was 5 times larger than before he arrived, and its market capitalization had risen by $27 billion. O'Neill resigned from Alcoa and went to work for International Paper, where he was promoted to president. O'Neill's safety loop concept for Alcoa: cue, injury, routine, report, reward, promotion. By 1996, Paul O'Neill had been at Alcoa for almost a decade. His leadership had been studied by the Harvard Business School and the Kennedy School of Government. In 2000, O'Neill retired from Alcoa and, at the request of the newly elected President George W. Bush, became Secretary of the Treasury. Chapter 5, Starbucks and the Habit of Success, takes off about Travis Leach, son of heroin addicts. Travis had great ambition that took him from unstable living to managing several Starbucks. The man who built Starbucks into a colossus is none other than Howard Schultz. Schultz came from public housing, whom ventured into college on scholarship for football, accomplishing a communications degree and eventually gaining a job as a Xerox salesman in New York City. When Schultz heard that the six-store Starbucks was up for sale, he asked everyone he knew for money and bought it. 1987. Willpower worked well for Schultz and Travis. Starbucks' main focus is employee development. Chapter 6, The Power of a Crisis. How leaders create habit through accident and design starts off with a man taking a fall that had slammed his brain against his skull, causing what's known as a subdural hematoma. He died on the operating table due to the surgeon's will to override paperwork, review essays, and improper openings of skull. The surgeon was barred from ever working in Rhode Island hospitals again. There are no organizations without institutional habits. Tuesday, March 25th, 2025, 15:4600, 3:46 p.m. Chapter 7, How Target Knows What You Want Before You Do, begins with the story of Andrew Pohl, a data expert for Target. The first job Pohl landed was as an statistician with Hallmark in Kansas City. Working at Target offered Pohl a chance to study the most complicated of creatures, the American shopper, in its natural habitat. 20 years ago, Target hired psychologists for the same job description they hired Pohl for: tactics to get customers to spend more. Target Mail has come into its own as a useful tool for promoting value and convenience to specific guest segments such as new moms or teens. Greg Steinhafel, Target's president, said, Part 3, The Habit of Societies, Chapter 8, Saddleback Church, and the Montgomery Bus Boycott. How Movements Happen is a take on the events of Rosa Parks and how her backing and various roles in her community stood up and brought about change within Montgomery, Alabama. Rosa Parks, member of NAACP, also involved in many charities. When Parks' mother got word she called the wife of E.D. Nixon, whom passed the word that Rosa needed to be bailed out of jail. They then asked her if she would be willing to let them fight her arrest in court. She agreed. That was just one effect of many forms of disagreement that came into play for her willingness not to get up. Rosa Parks' experiences offer a lesson in the power of social habit, the behaviors that occur. When Rick Warren first arrived in Saddleback Valley, he spent 12 weeks going door to door, introducing himself and asking strangers why they didn't go to church. Warren's church would address each of those complaints. Dress code would be first. You focus on building people, the Lord told me, and I will build the church. Now, when people come to Saddleback and see the giant crowds on the weekends, they think that's our success, Warren said. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. 95% of the church is what happens during the week inside those small groups. Thursday, March 27, 2025, 16:19:00, 4:19 p.m. Chapter 9, The Neurology of Free Will. Are we responsible for our habits? Speaks of Angie Bachman sitting at home watching television. Angie got married to a guitar player and became a mom of 3 girls. Her daughters were gone. Angie put on some makeup and headed to the casino, which the experience felt luxurious. And that night at dinner, she had something to talk about besides The Price is Right. Angie scheduled casino for every Friday afternoon, her reward for making it through the week. 1 hour, money in wallet only, home in time to pick up daughter. One afternoon, she sat down at the blackjack table with $80 in her purse and left with $530, enough for groceries, bills, and rainy day fund. She would treat the family to dinner with free buffet coupons. One time, she went home with $6,000, and another time, $2,000. Smart gamblers knew sometimes you have to go down to go up. Bachman's rules gradually became more flexible as the size of her winnings and losses expanded. One time she lost $800 in an hour, then earned $1,200 in 40 minutes. One month, she didn't have enough to pay the electric bill. She borrowed it from her parents. She borrowed $2,000 one month, $2,500 the next. She didn't know it was a problem till it had taken hold of her life. One day, it was fun. Next, uncontrollable. Next, it was uncontrollable. By 2001, she was going every day. The high of winning so immediate. The pain of losing passed so fast. Q. Challenges at home. Routine. Blackjack. Reward. Satisfaction. Angie. This was the only thing I'd ever done where it seemed like I had a skill. Bachman's debt at Harrah's Casino was $20,000. Her mother cut the stipends and she finally confessed to her husband. 3 years after Angie declared bankruptcy, her father passed away. 2 months later, her mom died. When they died, she inherited almost $1 million. $275,000 bought her family a new home in Tennessee. Then moved her daughter nearby. She lost the inheritance and took out a loan on the house for gambling. Brian Thomas murdered his wife. Angie Bachman squandered her inheritance. Is there a difference in how society should assign responsibility? Why do some habits seem like they should be so easy to control, while others seem out of reach? Aristotle wrote in Nicaean Ethics, hold that it is nature that people become good. Others that it is by habit, and others that it is by instruction. Afterward, some things about weight loss, smoking, procrastination, and teaching. A few months after The Power of Habit was published, I was at my desk at the New York Times when an email appeared in my inbox. The day after I finished the first half of your book, I had what I hope will be my last drink. I went to my first AA meeting on August 1st. 6 days later, I have now been sober for 41 days. I have a long way to go. I have a new hope that I never had before. Question. What do you think was triggering your overeating? Tom. I think it was the fact that I was sometimes bored or stressed, and I had gotten into this habit of eating to relieve that. Question. So how much weight have you lost? Tom. It's been about 6 months, and I've lost over 70 pounds. I'm still going. I want to get myself down to about 225 or so. That's why the book was so important to me. Smoking was the keystone habit for all these other bad patterns. And once I shifted that habit to meditation, it was like all these other changes got easier. Joseph Speaks. The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg was a great read for me. As pinpointed throughout Knight's Digest as I leave you with this. We learn about ourselves sometimes without knowing we're learning. Prochaska. Thursday, April 3rd, 2025, 10:04:50, 10:04 a.m. Knight's Digest. Turnpike Plaza, 365, Rec Squad.